Good morning, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors. The date is May 9th, and I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask the clerk if you'd please do a roll call.
Supervisor Lingenfelter?
Present.
Chairman Angus?
Here.
Supervisor Johnson?
Here.
Vice Chair Bishop?
I am here.
And Supervisor Gold?
Here.
We do have a quorum. Everyone is present.
Okay. And just for the record, I'm the only one here in person, and everybody else is attending virtually, and I do appreciate everyone's time this morning. We have one item on the agenda. This is to approve the cancellation of the July 30th, 2024 election of precinct committee persons and deem them elected to the positions filed for. This was continued from the May 6th, 2024 Board of Supervisors meeting. I think we needed a little more clarification, and so the board agreed to continue this, and this is the date that has been set aside to do that. So I think to start out with, the problems that I saw with this this item to deem everyone elected is we received a list of persons wishing to be elected, and because all of the positions for PC were not filled, it is legally permissible to ask this board to appoint those members as elected and treat them the same. Is that correct, Attorney Espen?
So what's being requested here is to cancel the election, and by canceling it, then the board here would be appointing these persons to those positions. And the basis for canceling it is because the persons who have filed nomination papers for each of these positions, they're the only candidate. And when there's the only candidate, there's no other race, there's no other need to go further with the race. If the board denies this, if the board decides not to approve this, then what the elections department will do is the elections department will then put the races on those ballots. So that's really what the issue is, whether to have these on there or not. And from a practical standpoint, it makes very little sense to put them on the ballot because they're the only person running. It's a pretty routine procedure for the board here to cancel elections when only one person is running in that race. Every election cycle, the elections department puts forward these types of races where if only one person is running for the race or no person's running for the race, then they'll cancel the election. Similar ones happen for special districts. Those are often canceled. There's certain races that can never be canceled, but some of these down races, for lack of a better word, can be canceled, and that's what's being done here. The period to challenge these nomination petitions has passed, and so there would be no basis to be able to challenge those because we're past that deadline. But if the board doesn't want to pass this, then they will be placed on the ballot, which would be a pretty significant cost and cost to put them on the ballot and so on. So that's kind of the reason of why we're here today.
Okay, so initially the list of candidates was sent to us after the deadline to challenge. So this board had no way of knowing who was running for precinct committeeman, although we could have went to the elections board and obtained that information. But now that we did receive a list, it seemed to at least more than one supervisor that the fact that many on this list only had a post office box. And so the concern was, how does this board know that that person lives in the precinct that they're wishing to be elected to? And then there was an issue with using nicknames or initials for their name, and apparently that's okay, that's legal. But the concern with the post office boxes, I think is a legitimate concern. So the elections department did provide with provide the board with an amended list showing the physical addresses. And I think the question now is legally, do these people that only used a post office box need to file an amended petition before we appoint them as elected? And the reason that this is being questioned is because, there's been so much in the news and with our own local representatives about election fraud. And we've been able to brag that Mojave County does everything right, and our election director is outstanding and kind of leads the field in elections employment history. It looks like Mojave County could do a better job of this. So I'd be interested in hearing what any of the other board members have to say about this. And I'll open the floor up, starting with Supervisor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess my biggest question right now is, we received this list with addresses. Where did that list come from?
Do we, thank you, Supervisor Johnson. Do we have Alan Temperate on video?
You absolutely do. That list came from the voter registration system.
Okay, I guess my question then is, Arizona revised statute says that nomination forms will have a physical address on it. Why are we altering the information that is filed by candidates? What gives us that authority to alter that?
I don't believe that Supervisor Johnson, I don't believe that the nomination papers had their post office boxes on them. But they probably, I'm so sorry, I'm not going to, got it, hold on. There's a space for a mailing address, and there's also a space for a situs address. And unless I go and look at them, right now I can't answer your question. Sorry.
Chairman, if I could jump into this. Vice Chairman Bishop and Supervisor Johnson, just to be clear, the nomination petitions do not require the physical address. So I'm looking at 16-315. It says the nomination petitions shall be in substantially the following form, and it goes through the criteria. And if you go to paragraph 4, it says the signature portion of the petition shall be divided into columns headed by the following titles: signature, printed in name, and then it says actual residence address, description of place of residence, or Arizona post office box address, city or town. So the petition actually only needs either the physical address or a PO box. So that's a situation where that wouldn't be one that would disqualify it if they used a PO box.
I'll have to pull that up again. I had it in everything I've read, just like when you do a voter registration, that you have to have a physical address. You can put a post office box, but you have to have an address or a description on it. Everything says that. Maybe you can go to somebody else and I'll pull it up.
Okay, thank you, Supervisor Johnson. We'll come back to you. Supervisor Langenfelter?
Thank you, Vice Chair Bishop. I've read through the statutes, and I don't see what the problem is with just approving this cancellation of these elections. I've read through all these things, and everything it appears to me to be legal from my read of it and from listening to Ryan. That's the only comment I have.
Okay, Supervisor Angus.
Yeah, I agree with Supervisor Lingenfelter. So there's a couple of us who went through this process. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So a couple of us here on this board have gone through this process, and you fill out the form given to you by the elections department, and you get 10 names, and then you have a choice of whether to submit it through the party or just go up to the elections department and give your petitions, and they just take it. They don't vet it. ideally, should be vetted by the party, but people are free to do what they want to do. And so I think that if there is a choice in the statutes that they can have this, I see no reason in making this a bigger deal.
Okay, Supervisor Gold.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. Director Temperate, do we make these forms in-house, or do these forms come from the Secretary of State's office?
They're from the Secretary of State's office. Yeah, we get them right off of their website, so to speak. The version that we use is called Secretary of State Revision 7/28/2021. That's the most updated version that they have, so that's what we put on our website, as well as put together hard copies for candidates who would like that.
I don't remember. The form has both a space for physical address and for mailing address.
It does.
I don't see the problem here today. Thank you.
Mr. Esplin?
Yes, if I could just jump in here, and I misspoke. What I read to you was the forms that people signing the forms can sign, and they don't have to put their physical address. They can put their PO box. So I misspoke earlier. I want to clarify that. What we're looking at really is an issue of 16-311, and that one says any person desiring to become a candidate at a primary election for a political party and to have the person's name printed on the official ballot shall be a qualified elector of the party, and not less than 120 the date, shall sign and cause to be filed a nomination paper giving the person's actual residence address, or if the person does not have an actual residence address, a description of place of residence and post office address, or if the person's actual residence address is protected, a post office box or private mailbox address in the district, in the candidate's district or precinct as applicable, naming the party of which the person desires to become a candidate, stating the office, a district, if any, for which the person offers the person's candidacy, stating the exact manner in which the person desires to have the person's name printed on the official ballot, and giving the date. So what that has is, it says that the person has to give the actual residence address, or if the person does not have an actual residence address, a description of place of residence and post office address, or if the person's actual residence address is protected, a post office box or private mailbox address in the candidate's district or precinct as applicable. So I do think that Supervisor Johnson has a valid point, and I apologize for what I stated earlier. I just want to make sure we're correct. That being said, the issue here, though, is it's already past the time to challenge anything. And I don't have the petitions in front of me, so I don't know. I can't opine whether these are correct or not. But the fact of the matter is, we're past the deadline, and to file an amended nomination petitions would not be something that would be allowed by law.
Okay, is there a process if one of these persons on the list that we deem elected, we find out filed false information or misleading information, then there is no other recourse other than recall, or is there?
Well, if somebody's filed misleading information, false information, if they knowingly did it, I'm not going to accuse anybody of any crimes, and maybe clear, but anytime you file an official document, if somebody knowingly provides false information, then there could be grounds that could be submitted to the prosecuting office to determine if a crime has been committed. So you can look at that. The other thing that can be looked at, though, is the vacancy statute. If somebody is in office and either they've moved from the precinct or they no longer live in the precinct, then they shouldn't be serving in there. Somebody could file an action to remove the person because they're not living in the precinct, because the office is vacant. So that's something to look at. So there's other remedies or avenues. If somebody is truly not qualified to serve in that office, then they could be removed through a court action and not through a recall. Because if you look at that vacancy statute, there's about 10 different ways that an office could become vacant. Let me just pull it up. And sometimes what happens is that it's not clear that somebody has met the criteria. And so somebody could challenge that and file it in court. So 38291, the vacancy statute, if somebody, for example, it says, if the office is elective, the person holding the office ceasing to be a resident of the state, or if the office is local or from a legislative or congressional district, the person holding the office ceasing to be a resident of the district, county, city, town, or precinct for which the person was elected. So let's say somebody moves or they didn't put in their accurate address, they don't live in the precinct. If we find that out, if somebody finds that out, the county, the taxpayers, the voters can file an action to remove the person saying, hey, declare that this office is vacant because they no longer live in the precinct or they no longer live in the district. So some of these come up where you're like, well, something ought to take place, and then they could be removed that way. I know in the past, the county attorney's office, when the county attorney's office has learned that something like this has happened, what we have done in the past is we've reached out to the person and said, hey, you don't meet the criteria here, and the persons have voluntarily resigned in the past, so that a court action wasn't necessary, but a court action could be necessary to remove them.
Okay, and we do have at least one person on this list that's a little elusive about the place of physical residence, and I don't think any of us are going to do an investigation on that, but it has been a continual problem in the past where you really can't pinpoint whose house the person is staying at and doesn't really have a physical address. So. And then the other problem I had was there's one on the list that currently has, the GLP has a judgment against this person, but apparently that would not prevent someone from becoming a precinct committeeman, even though the GLP has a judgment against this person that's not been paid. So that's a mute situation. So, Supervisor Johnson, did you have any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Attorney Espen, for clarifying that. I was pretty sure I'd read it. I looked it up also. I guess what concerns me is the county has no check like signatures, and we're not even worried about signatures on a petition. What concerns me, and it's not so much even state committee minutes for any elected office, and maybe Mr. Esplin could answer this, a nominating form is in the statutes. Shouldn't the county be saying, no, this nomination form is null and void? It'd be for PC, county attorney, court judge, whoever. And our responsibility to check that and not accept the form that is filled out.
Supervisor Johnson, that's a great question, and that's one that, in fact, I've talked to the elections department in the past before, because really what they're at is they're in a very, very difficult position. I can almost say they're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So if they were to function as that gatekeeping function and say, hey, this petition doesn't work, we're not going to accept it, well, then they're going to be sued by the candidate. And if the candidate's right, now the elections department has prevented them from being on the ballot, and we have a problem. So you have that. On the other hand, I see your position where you say, well, if it's clear and obvious that this isn't filled out right, why is the elections department accepting that? So, which one do they follow here? Do they follow the position you're taking, or do they follow the position that the candidate is taking? That's a hard position for them to be in, and that's why I say they're damned if you do and damned if you don't. What I've instructed them in the past is accept the nomination petitions because it is on it's on someone else to challenge them. If you as an elected official take that risk, if you don't go through the steps and if you take that risk, the risk is that within the next 10 days after you file that, after the deadline pass, somebody can challenge that, and if they challenge that, you're going to be off the ballot. Elected officials, somebody who's running for office, do you want to take that risk? Do you want to take that risk of taking that on, of somebody being challenging? So In the past, I've instructed them to accept the nomination petitions as they are. But I think you make a valid point, and something I can talk to the elections department about is I could say, if it's clear and obvious that something isn't on there, like if the requirement is to have 50 signatures and they're submitting it with only 2, then that's clear and obvious, where the elections department can say, hey, look, the requirement here is 50. You may want to go back and fix this because you clearly have not met the statutory requirement of 50. Or if they submit a petition and they've omitted a lot of the stuff on there that is required, then the elections department can say, hey, look, you've omitted a bunch of this stuff. You may want to go fix this before it comes in. But again, the challenge here is that the department cannot give any legal advice. And I've made that very clear to our elections department that they are not to give any legal advice, because if they're giving legal advice, then it potentially becomes liability for the county. And so they're just in a hard spot. I really I do see your position. I see where the county wants to make sure that things are done properly. But I also see the position of candidates where if we stop them, if we're that gatekeeper, then they may not get on the ballot. And what if they don't get on the ballot and it's the county's fault? And that's a real problem too. I would hate to see the election stop somebody from getting on the ballot when they did it right. So it's a hard position. I think you make a valid point. And I'll talk with the elections department to see how we can properly address that so that both interests are met. Making sure that they're not giving legal advice, but also making sure that forms are done properly, and also making sure that the candidates comply with the law, but allowing them to be on the ballot, assuming they've followed the law.
Vice Chair, Bishop?
Supervisor Angus, hold on just a second. Let Supervisor Johnson finish, please.
Okay.
Did you have anything else, Supervisor?
No, I appreciate what the county attorney is saying. I just think that on a nomination petition, that would be an easy one to say, hey, your form isn't completed. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
If I could just finish out that thought, I want to be clear that Supervisor Johnson was correct that you do need that physical address unless you meet one of those exceptions, like if your name is protected or you don't have the physical address so you can use a P.O. box. So I think what he has brought up is actually really a good learning lesson and something we can apply in future elections and something I'll talk to the elections department about. But again, at this point, we're past the deadline for anybody to challenge. And so today's item really comes down to, do you wish to cancel the election or not? And if you cancel the election, those people will be deemed appointed to those positions.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Angus.
Thank you. I think that's a very slippery slope. I mean, the process, and tell me if I'm wrong, Alan, you don't want to get involved in that. I mean, look at what happened to the guy down in Phoenix where he had 9 pages of false. I mean, how much is the elections department responsible for people's nominating petitions? It's up to other candidates. It's up to other entities to challenge that's why we have a challenge period. I don't think the county wants to get involved with that. I know I wouldn't on the Board of Supervisors, and I don't think we should.
Thank you, Supervisor Angus. And I would like to see in the future the elections department provide the Board of Supervisors with a list similar to what they provided us just recently earlier, so that if there is a challenge, that the Board of Supervisors can make that challenge, or at least be aware that there might be a challenge on some of these that we may not want to appoint once it comes to this board to deem them elected. So.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. To build on that, I think we should be provided with the applications from each one of the PCs that has the whole sheet on it, and that if we want to take a look at it, we can do that, and if we don't, then we don't have to.
I agree, and that's not something you can pull up on our website, for the precinct committeeman. That's you have to actually physically go into the elections department to get that information. So I Good point, and I agree with you, Supervisor Gold. Anyone else? Okay. Hearing no other comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion to approve. It's been seconded. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, this meeting is complete. Thank you.
Thank you, goodbye.